timid this year.
Yeah.
But I have Eric for you. We look forward to your comments, Eric.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I've got a lot of stuff today. We're going to dig into a ton of new data, new products, all kinds of things. But first, we kind of have an exciting announcement that we feel like the people that are going to make this announcement, which would be Dave Johnson and myself, is kind of a representation of why we're all here. You know, OPEI brings together multiple companies, some of whom are competitors, some of whom are co-opetitors, whatever the word is for that, and some of you don't even work in the same spaces. But Dave with Constellation and TraQline have recently formed an agreement. We formed a partnership to where we're doing a data sharing. And Dave, I'll let you kind of introduce it, and I'll fill in any gaps that I think we might need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't mean to be the prop that got, you know, a company.
Oh,
A little more than that, I think.
Yeah, sorry,
but
that
anyway,
came off wrong.
So, no, but really, so when we first joined OPEI, which was just only a few years ago for us, I mean, it was obvious that we have a lot of different members that are bringing different pieces to the organization to add a unique visibility and insight on everything that's going on in our markets that we all share. And so it was, you know, working with TraQline, we said, well, what's going on here? Are we competitors? Are we not? Yes, no, kind of, but ultimately, you know, what they look at, and we have different pieces of information, and actually the way that these presentations have flown today, flowed through today, you can see that we have what you asked about earlier, which was sell-into data. What is that? That's the units that are going into the distributor or going into the dealership. At Constellation, we represent over 3,000 independent dealers, and what we see is the dealer side of the business, and what we see is the retail transaction and the inventory that's in the independent dealers. So we see a very different piece of the industry from a different perspective than TraQline does. So there's some overlap there, and TraQline does some things that we don't do. They do interpretation, we really don't get into that, and they do a lot of enriching to data, which we don't do. We're just kind of electricity, and we say, here's the data, here's what dealers reported. So they have a very special and unique view on things that we don't have. We have a very unique, specific section of data that we look at that they don't have, and it just seemed to make sense to say, how do we bring these things together? And really that's the strength of this organization, is trying to bring, you know, potential competitors in a way together to say, how do we help the industry, and how do we help you, and how do we help the dealers, and how do we help our OEM customers, you know, have a better future all working together. So I think that's especially important in this climate where there's a lot of, you know, divisiveness, if you want to call it that. I don't know if that's a word, but there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of reasons to not get along right now, and I think it's pretty special that we have an opportunity to get along, see what we can do to bring something unique to the industry that wasn't there before. So then that's...
Yeah, and I'll dig into it a little bit more. Basically, we're ingesting this Constellation data. We'll talk about it in here in a little bit. I'll show you what we've got. And then we've created a product that's called Dealer Plus. So as Dave mentioned, we're kind of augmenting the information that we have with what they have with the information that we have on the market. So it's really exciting. I'm going to show you some data today. He's going to show you some data. Some of them overlap, but for the most part, a lot of them are just kind of separate pieces. So this is more of a formal introduction than anything else, and we're super excited. So thank you for jumping up. So, and I'll tell you the reason I didn't bring a pony or like a funny hat or anything like that. We haven't had time. Like, I mean, David Garcia, you guys probably, hopefully all know David. He's a rock star as it relates to data. He's been analyzing the heck out of all these different components that we have. And we've got a lot, especially now. It was bad before, now it's super bad. So it may not be. So I'm going to kind of cover a few of those, certainly not all of them. And then we're going to talk about how we look at the market, our market coverage. Then we'll get into specifically some of the residential share trends, we'll get into some of the retailer trends, and then brand trends. A lot of times what I do is I start with retailers, then brand, and then I talk about online, brick and mortar, you know, those things. I'm kind of shifting that a little bit this time. We're going to talk more about the price trends and online trends in the beginning, because they feed a lot of the information that flows down to the product detail. So we talk about brand, and then we'll get into some of these dealer insights. This is the Dealer Plus data that we were talking about. I've got splits with commercial and residential and so forth. So, you know, we've been doing this a long time, and we're very honored actually to continue to come back. So thank you all for requesting. I know we've been requested. I know I've muscled my way into some conferences, whatever it is. Thank you guys for having us. Thank you for trusting us for all of these years in the industry. What's really exciting about this timeline, though, is the back end. So a lot of great history leading up to now, but over the past year, 2 years, we've really done a ton of work to try and understand there's a lot of data sources out there. How can we turn them into a single source of information? And as a result of those, we've come out with new products, and we've also had to kind of look back and go, well, we need to rebrand. Because we've had this TraQline product for years, which was a survey, and then we said, okay, well, what TraQline stands for is consistency, it stands for consumer insights, it stands for market share, it stands for all of those things, and all of our other products encompass those as well. So we rebranded TraQline to Durable IQ, and now we have other products in there like Hybrid POS, SKU Metrics, Dealer Plus, and they fall under the TraQline brand. So TraQline is the company, and then the products are Durable IQ, HPLS. So I've labeled them at the bottom of all of our slides what the source is so that you're aware, because we merged them together because that's the value of it. So I want to talk for a minute about new data sources, some of the new sources that are out there. And I'm sorry if I'm talking so fast. They may not be new to you guys. You may have seen some of them, and I'm happy to get into a further discussion about some of the pros and cons of all of these sources. As you all know, there is no one ring to rule them all. You've all looked, right? You've all said, what is that source that's going to give me institutional OPE, it's going to give me residential, it's going to give me dealers? There is no one source. And I'm sure all of you have tried to build sources from build a single source from other areas, and that's really tough. It's really tough to bring everything together. There's a bunch of new technologies. Some of them aren't new, but web scraping, it's been around for a while. There's pros and cons to it. Sometimes you get kicked out whenever you scrape somebody's site. Sometimes the data doesn't take, but there's a lot of web scraped data out there. And that can include things like product features, it can include things like pricing, it can include things like where a product is sold. All of that is part of this web scraping. Internet page views and site traffic. Companies like, I think SimilarWeb is one of them. They're out there, they have cookies everywhere, and they're finding out what pages are consumers visiting, and they're tallying those up. And they're saying, this specific page on Home Depot's website was visited 400 times. And that specific page might have the slug of Home Depot / outdoor power equipment / line trimmer / gas / Ryobi / 4292. And they're collecting that information. So there's a lot of that out there. The problem is there's a lot of it in one huge S3 bucket or Snowflake cloud or whatever, and you just can't manage it. You can't access it. POS data is what these guys do, right? They're out there, they have terminals at an actual dealer, and those dealers have agreed to let them pull that information on a nightly basis, I believe, right? Daily, okay? They pull that information and then they aggregate it together. Pretty cool, okay? Problem is, you're never going to get 100% of the market with POS data. Okay, there's companies that do this in CPG, and they do a really good job. Nielsen, you guys have probably heard of them. They do a really good job with POS data. Okay, but there's also rules. You guys probably can't give information about a specific dealer. You can't give that information out. Then you've got receipts, right? Probably got, no, I don't have one in my pocket. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so like you take a receipt like this. This one's from Trixie's? No, this one's from FedEx, okay? And you can actually take a picture of this receipt, send it into a company, and they will OCR that for you and tell you everything that's on here. Okay, so that's receipt tracking. And there's panels out there. You guys ever heard that commercial on the radio? It's like, I just made $400 just buying gas this month. Did anybody hear that? It's like Gas Buddy or something like that. Well, that's what they do. They're getting the information from that person's purchase. Okay, so that's another potential thing. But again, none of these are the one ring. None of them rule them all, and we don't either. I'm not saying that we do. But if you take them all and you start adding them up, and you say, okay, here are the sources, and here's a company that's really smart, okay, and you start throwing it into a pot and stirring it up and figuring out what comes out, we can come up with a few new products that help solve specific needs. And so I'm trying to give you some background on the data that you're going to see here in a minute, just so that you understand how we collect it and why we did it. Okay. So let's talk about the market coverage real quick. I'm not trying to sell you stuff here. I'm just trying to explain exactly what it is that we track. Okay. This is what you guys are familiar with. Durable IQ, the old TraQline. Durable IQ is a consumer survey, 600,000 people a year. What'd you buy it? Where'd you buy it? How much you pay for it? What features did it have? Okay, so it's got that kind of information on there. It's a great view of the total market. Okay, it relies on consumer recall. Every once in a while, you're going to get somebody that says they bought a Ryobi at Lowe's. Okay, those sorts of things happen. It's really valuable though for tracking trends over time. All right, we also do the same thing in Canada. Okay, so we've got that information. New product here is SKU metrics. What SKU metrics is it's basically a competitive product master. So in order to understand which SKUs are selling at which retailers, we need to know what those SKUs are. So we built this big product library that has 3,000 OPE products in it. And in that product library, I can search by feature, I can search by brand, I can search by price point, and it will return for me all the models, not in the whole industry, but of the 3,000 that we've got that meet those criteria. So I can see this is the one at Lowe's, this is the one at Home Depot, those sorts of things. And that's what SKU metrics does for us. So it provides a baseline that we can use to then take hybrid POS, which gives us model level shares or SKU level shares at the nation's biggest retailers, Lowe's and Home Depot for now, Walmart and Amazon later. So now I can say this SKU 1, 2, 3, 4 that's a steal sells this much as a percentage at this retailer. So that's what HPOS allows us to do. So when I start showing you SKU level market share, that either comes from hybrid POS, or if it says dealer, then it comes from Dealer Plus. So they're very similar in terms of the value that they provide. So kind of summing it all up, we've got the overall market. This would be like Durable IQ. And then if I start talking about SKUs, that's coming from this hybrid POS product. Okay? So that's this chunk of the market over here. If I wanted to drill down further into those SKUs, I could use SKU metrics to understand what those SKUs are. But if I'm interested in any of the models from the dealer channel, then I can use our Dealer Plus data through a partnership with Constellation, and I can understand what those models are. Furthermore, I can take that dealer data, which is this chunk here, and I can sub-segment it out into consumers and commercial. That's this guy over here who figured all that out. Okay? So we can take all this Constellation POS data, use some inputs that we have internally, along with smart people, and figure out what's what. Okay, so that's what we're going to see. How much time did I spend doing that? I'm sorry. When am I supposed to end, Dan? Is it 2 o'clock? Yeah, you had an hour.
Oh, 2:20.
2:20. Oh, I got plenty of time. So these are the product categories that we track in OPE. Obviously, as a company, we track over 270 different categories. We're just going to focus on these. So this is my roadmap. So we'll start with the market overview, then whatever's in white is where we're at. Okay. Most of this, all of this is driven by TraQline Durable IQ, which is our consumer survey. So in terms of the product mix, every year, I think it's important for you guys to see, we got a little out of alignment there with the presentation, but it's important to see if we're talking about dollars, riding mowers is going to drive market share. So if I say, you know, Home Depot has a high market share in dollars, it's because they're selling a lot of these. But when I talk about units, it's far more evenly distributed. And a few types of units make up most of the market. You've got line trimmers, which is this green one down here, number 22, leaf blowers, which is 19, And then you've got walk behinds, which is 19. So what that says is that if you take the whole pie, 19% of the pie is walk behinds, 22% is line trimmers, and so forth, when we're talking about the unit share. Does that make sense? Any questions? All right, cool. So why is the dollar share so much higher here versus the unit share? Well, obviously, it's because if you take a riding mower and you look at the average price of a ZTR, a rear engine, a mid-engine, whatever the engines are, all that stuff, the average price is way, way higher. So a high average price drives high dollar shares. Okay? High volume drives high unit shares. Okay? So that's that. That's what we're going to look at. Let's look at unit shares. So let's look at retailer sales. 70% of OPE sales, as it relates to dollars, come from these three guys. That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay. Now, this is on, again, this is on the consumer side. Okay, this is on the consumer side. This does not include golf courses, municipalities. It doesn't include, what are the other ones that it might not include? Golf courses, municipalities, those are my big ones. Universities, that was the other one I like to throw in there. Okay, it doesn't include those guys. If we look at like the units, it's closer to 61%. If we add in like Amazon instead of dealers, it's closer to like 64%. Because Amazon, believe it or not, is actually selling OPE. Nobody believes that, do they? I'm kidding. All right, so here we go on the dollar share side. We can see this is the dealer channel here. Okay, it was up at about 30 about 5 years ago. It's declined quite a bit. Now we're somewhere around 23, 24, and everybody's kind of bunched up in here, okay, between Lowe's, Home Depot, and the dealers on the dollar side. Now, Evan talked earlier about the decline in ZTRs, right? ZTR prices are higher, okay, so you can understand some of the reasons that this dollar share has declined over here for the independents, because they do so much better on ZTRs. If we look at units, that yellow line is the scary one, right? That's, well, it may be scary, it may not. Amazon is a reality, right? We all have to accept it and figure out how to make money off of it. So we can see the Amazon line is this yellow one, okay? And then you've got Lowe's and Home Depot. So number 1, number 2, and number 3, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Amazon as it relates to the unit shares, okay? And note, again, down here on the bottom, I have the source, so whenever you guys are digging into this afterwards, the source is on there so you know where I'm pulling that from. So this is like, somebody's mentioned something about one of Grant's slides. They're like, all the numbers, lots of numbers on the slides. And you know, we've done the same thing here. I really just wanted to point this out right here. So these are the retailers. Blue is Lowe's, orange is Home Depot, this light blue is dealers, and then so on and so forth. I just really wanted to point this one out here. This is ZTRs. Okay, it's a little confusing with these on the bottom, they almost line up. But this is ZTRs, and this is dealers. Okay, so if you look at the dollar share, what percentage of the dealer dollars, this is total dealers, are mowers and ZTRs? It's about 40%. So big old chunk. Okay, a big old chunk. So that means that when you start getting to like walk behinds, it's only 7%. And when you get to chainsaws, it's much higher because of steel, it's 14%, 8%, 11%, 8%, 5, and 5, and 5. But if you take these two on the bottom, you can see this is 57% for just those two guys. So dealer dollar share, the takeaway on the top, dealer dollar share is driven primarily by these riding mowers and ZTRs. So let's talk prices for a minute. Prices on the total residential market have gone up. Maybe not as much as your expenses have, right? As much as your sourcing of products and all that, but it's gone up, you know, between 2% and 6% over the past several years. Now, what this number is this is what the consumers have paid. Okay, so it could be that for this exact same model, they might be paying 10% more. Okay, but what this is this is saying of all the products they bought. So they could be mixing down and saying, all right, well, I'm going to pay 6% more, but I'm actually going to get a lower quality model. Or it could be the other way around. They could be buying a higher quality model. So this is really just what they paid. And the average price for all of the OPE right now on the residential side, this is all of our data, is $359, and that's up about 6%. This is really interesting to me, like, ouch, right? But people were really pinching their pennies in 2020. So now we start breaking out some of this Dealer Plus data. So what we've got here is, this is a total consumer number, okay? So on a total side, we've got residential riders at a 14% increase in price. Okay, this is total. Snow throwers, 10% increase in price. Walks are 8, ZTRs 8, pressure washers 7. I'm reading these in case you can't read it from back there. Leaf blowers are 5% increase, hedge trimmers 1, line trimmers and chainsaws also a 1% price increase in what consumers are spending. But if we take our split on the dealer versus the, take our split on consumer versus commercial on the dealers using our Dealer Plus numbers, we see a much different story. So on snow throwers, you've got over 21% increase in price. So this is when we separate that model and say this is actually a commercial model, it's way higher. People are spending way more money than they were on a year-over-year basis. But other products like residential riders, I mean, well, obviously it's 0 because consumers, commercial people aren't buying residential riders. But you've got other things like walk-behinds that are an average of 10, ZTRs an average of 11% price increase on the commercial side, and a 5% on the consumer side. So across the board, you guys aren't surprised, right, to see these prices increasing. How commensurate is that with your costs? Like that, this guy right here, the 6%. Is that like, ouch, I wish it was, I mean, I probably all wish it was higher to account for that, but is that close? Does that feel good? Anybody like that number? Anybody hate that number? Any comments on that number? Anyone? Nothing? Okay. So let's talk online for a minute. Does anybody want to guess what percentage of the total residential market is online? 30? 30? That's a great guess. That's a really good guess. But it's not quite right. It's too high. 20? I'm sorry? 5? 20's too low. What's 18? Well, 20 was too low, so it's got to be over 20. So we're between 30 and 20 now. 25's too low. 27. 27's too low. 28? 28%, you said.
No, wait a minute. I think 30 should count.
Fine. I will send your T-shirt. Just give me an address to send it to. Yeah. So I'm glad it was right. I was doing that from memory. I was like, oh shoot, was it really 23? But 28% of the unit sales are online. Now, if we go to dollar sales, is that going to go up or down? Down because of riders and ZTRs. Okay. So 28% of all unit sales are online. Now, this was something that we were talking about several years ago. There's this thing, thank God this isn't a presentation about the pandemic. Are you guys happy to not be talking about that over and over again? But there was this thing years ago where we're like, pandemic hits, changes in consumer behavior, and then the big question was, is it gonna stick? Right? We all kind of said, is this remember everybody kept saying, is this the new normal? And you were like, don't say that anymore. So it stuck. And our prediction was, it's not going to go back down. And our prediction was, it's probably going to inch up just a little bit. So that's kind of what's happened. So we do feel smart. It went from 20 to 22, way up to 27, and then it really flattened out. We've gained just a little bit this year. So from this might have been like 26.8, and now we're at like 27.6 or something like that. I'm making those numbers up, but they're rounded. So it's really just kind of fluctuating in here. My next prediction for my next trick, it's going to go up again. That's what I'm saying here. It's going to continue to go up.
Can I ask what forms of online go into this?
This is any consumer who purchased a product online. So what we do is we say, did you buy a line trimmer? And they say yes. And we say, what store did you buy it from? And they say, I bought it from Home Depot. And then we say, did you buy it online? So it's really, did they swipe their credit card online? It could be BOPUS, it could be shipped to home, it could be shipped to store, which is BOPUS. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah. The BOPUS, is it shipped to stores, is it shipped to home?
Yep.
Because certain retailers split that up, and some retailers put BOPUS in their in-store number versus their online number.
Yeah. So this is really before all of that. It's did you buy it online? So it's did you put your credit card number in, or let Google do it for you, or Apple. So flattened out. We talked about the dollars here. It's lower, of course. The reason it's more flat is because there's a decrease in the sales of these higher priced products. So it's flattened out a little bit. If we look across the board for these guys, it's still pretty high. I mean, 20%. It's still pretty big, in my opinion. Pretty big number for a product that you get on and ride around. Although I did buy my car online, so I guess I shouldn't say that. From a retailer perspective, there's been some shifts, but not much. I mean, this is really just year over year. I've got percent change. I should have said percent change versus last year. Total was 28%. We talked about a 1% increase. Depot is around 18%, but notice everybody, of course, is below this 28% line because of this one guy in the middle, right? Amazon, as far as I know, you can't buy a rider from that shop in Manhattan where you swipe your credit card. You can't do that yet, but maybe. So everybody's, Home Depot's doing a better job online than is Lowe's. Walmart's doing a better job than the rest of them. So this is kind of how that breaks out in terms of the online mix. Let's talk fuel type. My next trick, fuel type. If we just think about let's think about battery and gas. Now there's still corded products that you plug in, but battery and gas, which is higher? Everybody who thinks battery is higher, raise your hand.
Which category?
Oh, all OPE, great question. So this is all OPE units. Units, great question. Battery higher, raise your hand. Gas higher, make sure you raise your other hand. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so we're close. Dollars, clearly going to be gas. We're tied though, so all of you are right. Everybody gets a shirt. Talk to David. So about 38%, but still about 25% of these products are plugged in. So a decent amount here. But the trend is continuing to change, right? We see that through, with regulation. Obviously, you guys are very focused on that, some of the regulation. And then obviously as technology changes, we'll expect to see some additional shifts in this as well. Predictions, somebody's going to ask me for my prediction. I expect this. Notice there's a bit of a deceleration here, right? 4-point change here, 2-point change there, 1-point change there. I expect, in my opinion, that it will continue to slide. It's not going to accelerate unless there's some sodium ion battery technology that changes everything and increases power delivery rates and all of those things. I will tell you this, my battery powered chainsaw, not my favorite. Not my favorite. And we heard it from, was it Steve? Tim, thank you. We heard it from Tim, right? There's just a difference in those products. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a difference in products and how they're used. So maybe as technology changes and some of those things change, we'll see some changes in that. But for now, this is where we're at.
Hey, Eric,
Yeah.
does that include generators and
No.
pressure washers?
It includes pressure washers, but it does not include generators. It includes riders, it includes walks, line, leaf, hedge, snow. I think that's it. There's like 8 categories. So this is interesting. So again, if we take, we've got a few different pieces of information. Remember, total residential here is the big picture, and these 2 bars here are subsets, right? So this is kind of a breakout of this total residential, if you will. So I've got total residential in this light, very, very nice light blue color, okay? And then here we've got big box, so that's Lowe's and Depot in the blue. And then in the green, we have the residential segment of the Dealer Plus data. So what we can see is fuel type here. On the residential side, consumers are going to these dealers to buy gas-powered products. They're going to the big box here, and they're still buying the gas products, but they're definitely buying more of them at the independents. And as we come down here to the dealers, we can see here's the mix of batteries. It's very small, whatever that is, 6% or something like that. Not really any plug-ins, okay? And then if we come down here on the units, we see the same story. So very small as it relates to battery powered at those dealers. Again, this data comes from the Constellation stuff, the green bar here. This blue bar comes from Durable IQ. This is just how it's split out. Okay, this is a good slide. A lot of numbers, a lot of colors. Some big bars and some little bars. There you go. So let's talk about brands for a second. And this is where we really start to slip down the rabbit hole a little bit, because I'm going to talk about the top brands in the market. So if we think about dollar share, it's John Deere, right? Because they sell a lot of those green things that ride around the yard. Okay, but when we look at unit share, we see Ryobi as a big player in the units. That has started to slip a little bit. Statistically, that's probably the same number because there's that margin of error in there, but generally speaking, they're much higher, a couple points higher than the next highest brand, which is Craftsman. Okay. On the dollar side, again, this is driven primarily, you got Cub Cadet in there as well, and Toro, driven primarily by the riding category. But that's why I like to focus on the units. It's a little more normalized. They're both really important though. You can see on the units on the Black & Decker side, that is the Black & Decker brand. That's not SBD. The Black & Decker brand has declined. Craftsman, you know, pretty flat overall. I mean, had a really good spike here in 2020, but generally speaking, this is about a flat line over time. This blue line here, right here, this is Ego. Okay, so that's kind of a proliferation of batteries, of course. But remember, this is across all their categories. So this would be Ego, Leaf, hedge trimmer, line trimmer, walk behind. So it's all those things. So the more categories somebody's in, then the better they're going to do on unit share because they have more opportunity to contribute to the overall. So, and that's a strategy that they plan, obviously. Dan's checking out that slide. I want to cut it before he's ready. All right, so when we look at the top number 1, number 2, number 3 brands by category, I could give you market shares for them. They're kind of in that other one, but really, you know, here's 1, 2s, and 3s. You'll notice this row right here, Craftsman, okay, they're in the top 3 for everything. Okay, so strong brand there. Black & Decker, you know, you've got number 2s for Leaf and Line, but Ryobi's in number 1, 2, and 3 for a majority of these categories as well. Snow Joe kind of kicks them out when you think about pressure washers and snow throwers. Okay, so that's kind of throwing out the snow thrower for Ryobi. And then, of course, Ryobi does have a rider. It's just not doing great. Not doing terrible, it's just not doing great. So, again, my things got out of order just a little bit here, but let's talk about the product drill down. So if we think about walk-behind mower, here's my next quiz. The manufacturer, right? Some manufacturers make more brands than others. Who's the number 1 manufacturer in walk-behind mowers?
Toro.
Great guess, if we were using your data. Total, consumer. Anybody from this side of the room over that way? Nobody? Nobody? Come on, guys. Why? Why is it Stanley Black & Decker? Well, they make a lot of brands. DeWalt, Craftsman, Black & Decker. So the number 1 manufacturer, this is why I love this rabbit hole. There's a different manufacturer, number 1, there's a different brand, number 1, and there's a different SKU, number 1. I just gave away the whole show. I ruined it. I meant to save that until the end. So the number 1 is Stanley Black & Decker at 18% market share. If we look at Home Depot and Lowe's, and then remember, this is kind of a subset of, these are both subsets of this whole number. This is the dealer portion, that pie, and it's only the residential portion, so a smaller piece of the pie. Okay? We can see that TTI is number 1 at Home Depot, Stanley Black & Decker is number 1 at Lowe's. Okay? We get down into the dealer residential, you've got Toro, number 1, okay? Honda, Steel, so on and so forth. Okay? So Briggs is down here at 4%, Shervon at 4%, Honda at 7%, TTI here is at 9%, Toro at 11%, and Stanley Black & Decker at 18%. Oh, crap! I didn't mean to advance. Now you guys know. The number 1 walk-behind mower brand, any guesses? Is Toro, but it is tied with Craftsman. Toro just edges out Craftsman just a little bit. If we take this to the next step, now we can see over here at Home Depot, you've got Ryobi at 39%, Toro at 29%. So what's driving Toro to number 1 when you've got Ryobi, Craftsman, and Toro doesn't even show up at Lowe's? Well, it's wherever my mouse pointer is, it's this guy right over here. So it's the combination of this and this, help put them up here. That's right, but that's all residential. So the residential customer sees the landscaper using it and goes, boy, that must be a good product. I'm not endorsing any brand. I should have said that at the beginning. Not endorsing any brand, retailer, channel, anything. I'm just showing you the data. Okay. So yeah, so that's the number 1 residential brand. We will show you the number 1 commercial or commercial brand at the dealer. Any questions on any of this before I go on to the next one? I don't want to give it away, what the number 1 model is. Any questions? What's the number 1 model? Who's not model? I know you don't know. You're not going to say it's a 2732 XBR. What brand makes the number 1 model? How about this? Let me just go down the list. Raise of hands. Ryobi makes the number 1 model. Raise your hand. Toro makes the number 1 model. Raise your hand. All the Toro people. Honda makes the number 1 model. Raise your hand. Okay. Don't look, David, you're not allowed to vote. You know the answer. Oh, I just gave it away. Murray makes the number 1 model. Raise your hand. DeWalt, I've already given it away. The number 1 model is Honda, which to me is a little terrifying. Okay? Because the decision to end lawnmower production is driven by market forces such as stricter environmental regulations, shifting customer preferences, and our focus on growing profitable products in our portfolio. That comes from the Honda Dealer Interactive Network. So Honda makes the number 1 model of mower, but they're going to stop. So again, that's a business decision, right? I'm sure there's a good reason behind their business decision. It's just really curious to me. But here's why Honda's number 1. Is because they're everywhere. That 1 model or a derivative of it is here and it's number 3. It's here and it's number 3. And it's here on the residential side and it's number 1. So when you look at Ryobi here, you can see they're limited, right? This is 14% of Home Depot. So if Ryobi were to get in these other guys, and I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, it's just an observation, then they would have a greater opportunity to capture market share. But it's the decision, as you all know, of these retailers to carry individual special models, those sorts of things. So it's just interesting to me to see this Honda model. Now, other guys have much higher share. This Ryobi has a 14% share. It's obviously a battery-powered unit. So there's some interesting findings in here. So if I take these top 6 and I compare them, that's that Honda model. I forgot to put that slide in there. It's a 21-inch, 3-in-1 variable speed, gas walk behind, self-propelled lawnmower with auto choke, and it probably has a cup holder on it. If I go to SKU metrics, okay, that's our thing that pulls all the features and all that. These are the top 6 models. I can look at the, yes, this is a sales job for this one. I can look at the individual picture of the product. I can see what the product is. I've even got features. There's features that go down way past the bottom of the page. But I can see that 4 out of the top 5 SKUs here are gas. It's actually top 6. So yeah, it's top 6 because this Honda's in here twice. Okay, so gas is still, you know, when you're looking at a product like this, still that product. Another thing that we like to show, I'm actually perfect on time. David and I found this really interesting. So, you know, if you look at the top models in each of these retailers, so this Home Depot, Lowe's, and then the Dealer Pluses, again, that's the residential component of the Dealer Plus. 75% of the top 10 SKUs make up 75% of the share. So if you're 19, your share's like 3%, okay? And in October, a 3% share isn't really that great, or December or January. So it's really important to think about where your product sits, how much is it selling? Because if you're not in that top 10 across the board, you know, 2/3 of the, or 1/3 of the market, yeah, 2/3 of the market is not buying your product. When we look at price points, again, we've got this residential component over here. This was pretty cool. 28% at Depot or 501. This is from HPOS, right, David? This is from our hybrid POS data. If you look, 28% of the models are $501 and above. 31% in this point, I mean, you can read this. But what's really remarkable is the Dealer Plus, that residential side. So when we take only the residential models that consumers are buying, they're not going there for the low price stuff. They probably aren't even selling it, honestly. It's probably not even at the store. Because why would you put a lower price model like that? So it's next to nothing on the walk-behind mowers in that very low price point. Not very low, but that low price point. So again, like now we start digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're looking up and seeing this little ball of light up here. What we've done now is we've broken out gas and battery at Home Depot and Lowe's. Here are the top models. Again, here's that Honda model on the gas side, but on the battery side at Lowe's and Depot, you see this Ryobi model. But check this out. The models are different. You know, you've got this Toro SR21, here's a 21, so they're probably pretty much the same. I did Google it, I was having a hard time figuring out the difference. But then you've got Honda on here twice, 2 Toros, so from a mix standpoint, they're similar. Obviously you can't get Craftsman there, but look over here on the battery side. Ryobi, Cobalt, Ego, Ryobi, all of those are proprietary, they're house brands. Come down here and kind of steal in a way as a house brand if you think about it. But then you've got the Toro model on there as well. So pretty interesting when you start looking at the split on gas versus battery, by SKU, and then just the volume of SKUs that go through here. This is 5, okay? 17 plus 12 is 29, plus 10 is 39, plus 9 is 48, plus 8 is, I was doing so well, 56. Did I do that right?
Yes.
5 models make up over half the sales. And that one, I'm going to make it up. I'm going to say that's about 56 too, because I would definitely mess up the math. So really, just 5 models is 50%. 10 models is 75%. Think about what 15 is, right? All right. So that's really kind of the broad view. What I tried to do is kind of take total market and then say brand, manufacturer, brand, model. What are those? What are these things? Fuel, we call them fuel type, gas versus battery. I want to dive in just a second more into this data that we've got, that we've done the analysis on the dealer stuff. But does anybody have any questions on any of this stuff that I talked about yet? Kind of total market, as opposed to diving deep into this dealer insight. Okay. So the #1 manufacturer in the OPE channel is Toro. Okay, and the Exmark brand is kind of leading that. If we look at how they contribute, remember we looked at this for the total residential market. This is actually the total dealer market of the data that we get from these guys. So it's, some of it's residential, some of it's commercial, okay? But a big difference here, remember this was about 20%, this is about 20%, this is about 20%, I think this is about 5%. And then over here is much larger on the rider side. So there's just some real nuances as it relates to how this, the dealers behave, as you would expect. I mean, people go to those dealers for a very specific reason, as opposed to going to a Lowe's or going to a Depot. And so it's not surprising how that changes. It's just important to know what's in there as I show you different data points. This is really interesting when we look at the average price paid. Again, this is both the commercial side and the residential side. About $1,600, $1,700. That's 5x bigger than just the consumer-only piece. So big difference. A lot of that's driven by this $8,000 ZTR. That's not a ZTR only, but yeah, it is actually the $8,000 ZTR. Okay, and some of those ZTRs obviously are $20,000 and $15,000. Some of them are $5,000. If we look at the mix, the commercial mix is about 57% currently. It's stayed about the same. About 50% of the models that we're finding in there are commercial, and about 43% are residential. But if we look at the units, it's closer to 47 and 53, so these are not scaled. I tried to scale them, it just took too long. And then from an APP, stands for average price paid. From an average price paid standpoint, big numbers. As you would expect, the commercial people, models are selling for more than the residential models as a whole. It's just by segment. You know, the key thing here is gas and battery, right? So on the top, we've got this commercial segment, which is what Tim talked about earlier. Okay, very small on the battery side on the dollars, very small on the battery side on the units. Here's your average price paid. But when we look at the residential market, we're finding that a certain percentage of those people are buying, 20% are buying battery powered products there. Units. Dollars, much lower because of the whole ZTR effect. We need to name that. The Garcia effect, that's what I'm going to call it when we're talking about ZTRs. When we look at manufacturer market shares, you know, this is it, Toro, #1. Then you get into Stanley Black & Decker because of the different brands. And then you come down here under units, steel, very large, 48% because of, what is it? Why is that so high? Chainsaws? Yep. And their other, I guess they have the walk-behinds as well, so they got, you know, their distribution is so much different there. And then this is just the segment. So we've taken the total and then split it out into this residential and this consumer market. And then finally, in terms of that concentration, we talked about 75%, I think, for Lowe's, or for Depot, 68% for Lowe's, I think. For the residential, the top residential models represent 77% of those sales in that dealer channel. And then this is kind of an average. Oh, this is the last slide. This is just a whole lot of extra data. So we just took the residential top 10. Here are the top 10 residential models. Commercial top 10. Here are the top 10s of those. And then we've got the sum of how much those top 10 represent. 77% on the residential side, and on the commercial side, it's only 61%. So a lot more distribution of the model ranks, the model shares when you look at the commercial side. And that really is it. All right. I've got a few minutes, actually. So what questions can I answer? Chuck wanted to ask me about ZTRs and batteries. Because one of the things I didn't show. Yeah. One of the things I didn't show on. Boy, David, you put together a lot of slides on here. Because I don't have ZTRs on here, I don't have mowers on here. And so we did a quick search to figure out through HPOS at Home Depot and Lowe's, like how big are these battery powered ZTRs? Like I looked at the top 10 and I said, where is that Ryobi model that, you know, it's got car batteries in it or whatever it is. I know they're not really car batteries. And generally speaking, I think from a dollar standpoint, it was 6%. Is that right? Do you remember it was 6% and 2%? So I think 2% of the units and like 6% of the dollars or 4% of the dollars. Really just battery still on the ZTR side, just not gaining a lot of traction with the consumers. So we just didn't put it up here, it was just too small. But we did do a little digging on that. I just thought that was really interesting because they're all out there. right? You get there and there's all these models with all these batteries in them, and you're thinking, oh wow, they must be selling these things like crazy, and it's just not going as quite as much as one would think. Yeah, question.
I think it was your fourth slide at the end.
Okay.
You go up with the end and then bounce back.
What was the slide on?
Mowers.
Okay. No, we're getting there. There were 67 slides, so. Which way am I going?
To the end.
Well,
Which end?
I got an N down here.
Yeah, the end, right.
This guy? Okay, got it. Thank you.
Back up 3, please.
Okay. Boom.
Manufactured
So Stanley's going to have, oh my gosh, DeWalt, Black & Decker, Cub Cadet, right? Did I get that right? MTD, Hustler, yeah, Excel.
Oh, yeah.
So just that, again, I mean, a lot of brands, right? So a lot of opportunity to grab that share. And we have that segmented in our system where you can cut it by manufacturer, you can cut it by old manufacturer, new manufacturer, brand, retailer. Yeah, absolutely. This will be available to you guys after the presentation. There's also a pretty oh, here's David's number. You can have mine too if you want it, but again, David is the expert on this stuff. I know some stuff too, but I have a lot of props for him. We also have an appendix that has a ton of like key insights, takeaways, some extra data, and that's in the appendix. So I would encourage you guys to go out there and download this. I'm not going to bore you with all of that, although I'm pretty sure all of you find it pretty interesting. Cool. Yeah, question?
Just back to your online sales, the 28% of unit sales.
Yep.
What percentage of that is going to the Amazon?
I think I've got that slide in here. Let me see if I've got it listed here. Sorry, bear with me. We were going online.
I just know historically we always say Amazon is 50% of the market. Is that still true, or is it higher now?
I will have to find out.
Usually it's almost all Amazon.
The online sales? Yeah, I mean, if you look at the average here, 18, 13, 23, these guys are small players. These guys are about 50% of the market. So the average here is going to be around 16%, and the total's 28. I mean, you can kind of do some back. We've got that data. David or I can pull that for you. Are you looking it up now, David? You'll have it for you in about probably as soon as this computer boots up. But yeah, it's roughly around. I think that sounds about right if you do the back of the envelope. Good question.